Retiring is supposed to be one of the best days of your life, the start of the good life, the stress-free life more importantly. The last thing you want to be doing is starting off your retirement life with more headaches and issues than you had before. But don't worry, that's why I'm here, and I'm talking about the mistakes that you need to avoid when retiring here to Sarasota. But what makes me qualified on how to talk about retiring to Sarasota? Well, my father and I have been almost exclusively helping folks just like you purchase their retirement or second home that eventually turns into their retirement home. I've been meeting, speaking, and listening to people who have been making the leap to Sarasota since I was old enough to remember. And I've learned all of the tips and tricks that it takes that go into making the smooth transition into retirement life here in Sarasota. So without further ado, here it is. Now, tip number one is going to be visit Sarasota first. And no, I don't mean Siesta Key. People tell me all the time, oh, I've been coming to Siesta Key for years, maybe even 30 or 40. But more often than not, when I start to ask more and more questions, I begin to realize that they haven't really been off of the island. They've only visited Siesta Key. Really, the only time they've been off the island was to go to and from the airport. And in reality, most people don't retire on Siesta Key, whether it's because they can't afford to or they quickly learn that living on the Key, for the most part, kinda sucks. As a born and raised local, I wouldn't live on the island if I was given a house out there. And really, it's only for one reason, and that's the traffic. There's only really one main road that takes you to and from Siesta Key, or that takes you on and off of the island from the north and south end. And that road from about 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day is basically backed up all the way off of the bridge. No, I recommend spending a little bit of time in Sarasota, central Sarasota, anywhere on the mainland really. Maybe renting a place for 2 to 3 months during the summertime and doing all of the activities that you dreamed of doing when you finally landed here in Sarasota. Trust me, it won't take you very long to figure out if Sarasota is all that you imagined it to be, or if it's terrible, awful, and no good. And if you're worried about wasting money on rent, think about how much you could be saving when you realize that maybe the summer heat is just too unbearable for you, or that living through a hurricane or hurricane season is just too stressful and you really don't want to be dealing with all that. Now, you can avoid having to buy that house and all the trouble that goes into it. On the other hand, maybe you'll realize that becoming a snowbird is more for you. The point of visiting first is to get a true feel for Sarasota, not just that vacation lifestyle that everybody looks at Sarasota with through rose-colored glasses. Because we all know that vacation lifestyle and true living are two completely different things. Now, tip number two is to make sure there's nothing holding you back from moving. I've seen it all before, where we've helped folks move down here only for us to get a call a year, maybe 2 years later, saying that they're ready to sell. It's always one of two things too. Either they didn't listen to tip number one and weren't prepared for the reality of living here in Sarasota, or they want to move back to where their kids and their grandkids are. They'll say to us, we thought our kids would come down more often and visit, but they are caught up with their own lives, and we would rather be closer to them than live here. It's an unfortunate reality, but it is possible. So it might be important for you to sit down with your family. Tell them you're thinking about moving to Sarasota and see what visitation scheduling might look like for you. Because the last thing I want to see is for you to go through all of the trouble and, more importantly, the cost of hiring movers, searching for the right house, only to have to do it all over again in a short period of time. Now, tip number three, find the right area for your desired lifestyle. With my help, of course. What kind of retiree do you see yourself being? Are you gonna sit by the beach all day, every day, and soak up the sun? Man, I love Sarasota. The weather's amazing, the beaches are beautiful, and the people, they're just so friendly. I should move here. Are you going to explore new art venues and enjoy a show at the Sarasota Opera House or the Florida Studio Theater, or even the Van Wezel? Or are you going to be up at 6 a.m. riding your bike down the Legacy Trail before hopping on the pickleball court by noon? You see, these are three very different lifestyles, and they're all going to be found in different parts of Sarasota. Now, yes, of course, you can easily drive to anything you want to do, but wouldn't you want those activities at your fingertips if you had the choice and the knowledge beforehand? Now, if three couples came to me, each expressing those exact same different interests I mentioned earlier, even if they had the same exact budget, I would probably be pointing each one of those people to different parts of Sarasota. So, to save yourself some time, really narrow down what you value and hope to achieve when moving here to Sarasota. Now, I once had a couple come to me and say that they wanted to be really close to the beach and have a community that puts on a lot of activities for their homeowners. So, of course, I asked the first question I ask anyone who comes to me, and that question is, what's your budget? But the issue was they didn't have the budget to be really close to the beach. I tried showing them closer to the water properties, but many of them had stairs They didn't have the amenities that they were hoping for, and really all of them were kind of out of their budget. At some point they came to me and said, you know what, Zach, we really want out of Florida is the weather and the sunshine. So I can be happy with being by the pool for a majority of the time and still driving to the beach when we want to on occasion. Once they realized that, we had them under contract in a villa with a beautiful community pool and gathering area where the neighborhood met regularly to watch football games, grill out, and enjoy being around each other. Tip number 4 is to be prepared to downsize. I know most of you looking to move here come from a state where 3,000 to 4,000 square foot homes really aren't that uncommon, and having a basement for extra storage is really to be expected. I remember visiting my aunts and uncles in Nebraska when I was younger. I always remember seeing all of their houses and homes and thinking to myself, wow, my family is really poor. We only have a 1-story house. All of my cousins, they've got 3-story houses with pools, only to come and find out that our house here in Florida cost probably almost double what theirs did back in Nebraska. And then I started to learn that really they can only use their pools for 2 or 3 months out of the year, and then they've got to close them up. At that time, that used to blow my mind as a kid. What do you mean you can only use your pool for 2 or 3 months out of the year? What do you do with it the rest of the time? But whether you're looking to retire down here full-time or part-time, it's going to take some thought on what you want to bring with you and what you don't. Many people happily go from 4, 5, or even 6,000 square foot homes down to a 12 or 1,500 square foot home. But you have to remember, it's not as bad as it sounds. You gain access to year-round outdoor space. Maybe you have a front porch, a balcony, a screened-in lanai with a pool. These are things you don't have to close away for the other 9 months out of the year, but you do lose that basement. And for the most part, attic storage is kind of out of the question too. I mean, can you think of the last time you saw your retired friend or relative throwing boxes around above their head and hauling them up and down the ladder? Ow. You're telling me I have to do that 16 more times? Now, tip number 5 is begin thinking about the type of home you want to live in long before you move. For the most part, you don't want to begin your home search here in Sarasota expecting to buy a single family home and having to end up settling for a condo instead. The people who have the smoothest and best success with retiring here to Sarasota are those who plan early and often. We regularly get calls or emails from people who are 6 months to a year out from retiring, and they'll tell us what their budget is going to look like and what kind of property they'd prefer. Condos and villas are really popular here in Sarasota for retirees solely based on the fact that they have really limited maintenance. However, if you're somebody who's moving away from a place that sits on a 1/4 acre lot or even bigger, then it's going to take some getting used to living around people who are above you, below you, and to the sides of you. Many retirees think that they can handle multi-family living until I get to ask a few more questions. It usually goes something like this. So, when was the last time you lived in an apartment or condo? Oh, well, it was back in college, maybe 40 years ago or so. So you're okay with the idea that there will be people walking above you or playing their TV maybe a little bit too loud and you can hear it through your walls? Oh yeah, that's fine, we won't mind. Well, how often could you see yourself opening up the doors and the windows to your property? You're in Florida after all, the weather is great. Oh, well, we could imagine opening up the house at every chance we get. We'd love to sit on the back porch or balcony every morning and every evening. What if your neighbors smoke? Are you still going to be sitting outside? Are you still going to be sitting outside then? Are you still gonna wanna open up your house and let that smell inside? Remember, these people live directly next to you. Now, what if your neighbor Bobby, who's losing his hearing, is regularly taking phone calls outside and you can hear his phone conversations better than you can hear the thoughts in your own head? Now, usually this kind of conversation has them taking a step back and thinking, and maybe even reconsidering their priorities in a home. But on the other hand, if you're looking to be a snowbird, at least even on the beginning part, then maybe a villa or a condo could really be useful for you. Just for the peace of mind of knowing that there are other people close by. And let's be real, we've all been nosy neighbors before at some point in our lives. We all like to keep an eye on what's going on around where we live. This gives that added peace of mind to those of you who may be leaving your place empty for 4 to 5 months out of the year. All right, so now that you've got some of the tips and tricks and a game plan for moving to Sarasota, you might want to hear about some of the pros and some of the cons that come with living here in Sarasota. And you can check that video out right here.